Chapter 1. New World, New Life. The United States was a promised land at the beginning of the previous century for thousands of immigrants from the Old World. Among them were Isaac Sackler, a native of the Austrian Empire, and Sophie Greenberg from Poland, who came to the continent aiming to build their new life. Their union marked the creation of not just a new branch of the Sackler family, but the beginning of a whole dynasty of prominent physicians. Isaac Sackler was a kind of ideological inspirer, and it was at his insistence that their three sons, Arthur, Mortimer, and Raymond, become doctors. Persistently and systematically, he instilled in his sons values and dreams. According to Forbes, the Sacklers are the 30th wealthiest family in the United States. Arthur, the firstborn, was the family's main stake. Luckily, he understood the assignment and did his best to live up to his parents' expectations. Arthur's entrepreneurial skills proved themselves very early. He began working early and could financially support his family by the time he turned 15. As a student, he had managed to become the editor and photographer of the school newspaper. When he discovered and developed his potential for marketing and advertising, he sealed several successful advertising deals and other numerous hustles, which became his second successful career, as he liked to say, apart from medicine. Without exaggeration, the oldest Sackler brother seemed to embody an old saying, "A talented person is talented everywhere." In this review of Patrick Radden Keefe's extended history of the Sackler family, you will find out how Arthur, along with his brothers, managed to build one of the biggest business empires in the world, become one of the most generous patrons and philanthropists' clan, and turn themselves into the world's most odious dynasty. Chapter 2. Revitalizing Psychiatry, the start of Sackler's professional path. Pushed by their parents' dreams and their own ambitions, the three brothers set out to pursue a career in medicine, which was not an easy path. Arthur was lucky to graduate from NYU Medical School, while his brothers had to study in Scotland due to the limited Jewish student quotas in the U.S. The roadblocks continued to rise. The World War II outbreak didn't allow Mortimer and Raymond to finish their studies in Scotland, forcing them to flee to the States and continue their education at a non-accredited medical school at Middlesex University in Waltham. Later, the siblings reunited at Creedmoor Psychiatric Center, where their professional path started. Psychiatry was not regarded as a top branch of medicine at the time, so mental disorders were mainly ignored. Sending a patient to a psychiatric institution where he would receive electroshock therapy was a common response to the mental health issues of that era. The Sacklers hated that brutal way of treating patients, so they decided to find an alternative. They were disgusted at the limitations of their own medical knowledge, at the idea that there was no more humane therapy that they could offer. Patrick Radden Keefe. Soon they discovered that the brain's chemistry hid the success of electroshock. The electric discharge releases histamine into the bloodstream, widening blood vessels and bringing more oxygen to the brain. Thus, it became clear that an injection of histamine could easily replace electroshock, so the chemical activity theory of the Sacklers arose. The Sackler brothers established Creedmoor Institute for Psychobiological Studies in 1950 as their very own research institution, which was a huge success and skyrocketed their career. Later, pharmaceutical companies inspired by their discovery started developing drugs like Thorazine, which embodied their envisioned antipsychotic medicine. The brothers were pioneers in the adequate research and medical treatment of psychiatric diseases, thus significantly contributing to the deinstitutionalization of American asylums. Did you know? In 1955, for the first time in 25 years, the number of patients admitted to American mental institutions decreased. Chapter 3. Inventing the Pharmaceutical Marketing Wheel. At the time of his 30th birthday, Arthur Sackler had 15 years of experience in advertising, so getting a part-time job at William Douglas McAdams Agency, specializing in pharmaceutical ads, was a piece of cake for him. His extensive medical expertise, grasp of the industry, and aptitude for selling helped him rise fast through the firm's ranks and land prestigious customers like Pfizer along the way. At the time, Pfizer was working on bringing a novel antibiotic named terramycin to the market. Arthur promised to turn terramycin and Pfizer into household words, and he did so. He suggested a whole new approach to marketing, which included advertising explicitly directed at medical professionals. Not only did overt ads appear in professional medical literature, but covert advertisements did so in the form of papers and studies on the efficacy of various treatments. Of course, those were underwritten by the pharmaceutical developers themselves. Remember, Arthur Sackler was the first to conceptualize a new marketing idea now known as native advertising. That campaign was a huge success and revolutionized the industry, guaranteeing Arthur Sackler a place in the Medical Advertising Hall of Fame. After 2 years, he was promoted to president of the firm and acquired the whole company from McAdams following the success of terramycin. Soon, more and more pharmaceutical businesses were adopting a new strategy for product distribution. As a result, new market relations were formed between manufacturers and physicians. It was considered that physicians grew more brand-oriented, which created the initial alarm and questions about the influence of such collaboration on the adequate provision of medical care. Sackler refuted such allegations, claiming that his efforts had nothing to do with advertising. On the contrary, he was educating his colleagues by assisting them in learning about new treatments that were continuously flooding the market. Chapter 4. Grey Cardinal and the Musketeers. L.W. Froelich, who managed to take over all the big clients not appearing on McAdams' doorstep, sometimes overshadowed Arthur Sackler's advertising agency's bright prospects. Both men accepted the competitive reality and were respectively sharing the market, but very few people realized they were not adversaries. They were nearly best friends. Even more intriguing is that Sackler was the actual owner of L.W. Froelich, while Bill Froelich himself was just the face of the agency. The fact that the two companies with the highest shares in the pharmaceutical marketing industry were good buddies and run by the same people was never brought to public attention due to the conflict of interest. There was no chance that two competing companies would work with the same advertising firm, so a new ad agency had to be formed and Froelich was chosen to lead. Thus, they managed to deceive multi-million-dollar pharmaceutical corporations and become de facto monopolists in the market. However, this was not their only hustle. In 1954, Arthur came up with the idea of creating a company that would be the aggregator of pharmaceutical sales data, which consequently may sell its research to big medical enterprises so they could improve their marketing. Froelich, in turn, became the official founder and owner. Arthur Sackler's preference for remaining behind the scenes and following the Grey Cardinals policies ultimately became one of the distinguishing characteristics of the whole family business culture. The most exciting deal for the three, Sackler brothers and Bill Froelich, was the Musketeers Agreement, which they used to merge their enterprises. If one of the Musketeers were to pass away, the other three would receive all of his property. This would continue until the last Musketeer passed away, at which point their families would receive a reasonable amount of money, but their business interests would be donated to a charity organization. Arthur Sackler's business appetite grew every day, so he resolved not to restrict himself to promoting drugs and try his hand at manufacturing them. Hence, in 1952, he acquired a small pharmaceutical business known as Purdue Frederick for his siblings. Although they evenly distributed the firm's shares, Arthur decided to remain behind the scenes while Raymond and Mortimer were officially running the business. Chapter 5. The Key to Immortality. Arthur was the Sacklers' main business and behavioral trendsetter. He pioneered many spheres and settled several family traditions. Love for art and philanthropy were among them. It started as a hobby of collecting Asian art, but later he could not be stopped. His interests in collection were growing exponentially, and keeping all his possessions at home behind closed doors became problematic and joyless. On the other hand, supporting the growth and maintenance of civilization's cultural legacy sounded much more sensible. Philanthropy was not only a noble act for the greater welfare of society, but it also delivered several substantial advantages to the family. First of all, it assured the family's admittance into the exclusive circles of the world's elite, which Arthur Sackler, a child of Depression-era Brooklyn immigrants, craved. Remember, unlike the Sackler family's charitable works, none of their enterprises carried their name. But even more significantly, philanthropy guaranteed a certain kind of immortality. After all, visitors will never forget the name inscribed on the walls of art galleries, museums, and research institutions. There is an extremely long list of organizations and establishments worldwide that have benefited from the financial support of the Sackler family. In 1986, the Washington Post referred to the Sackler family as modern Medici, which is likely the greatest compliment to cultural benefactors. To better understand the degree of influence this family has in the United States and across the globe, the following is a list of some of the institutions that hold their name. The Sackler Wing in the Metropolitan Museum of Art that houses the ancient Egyptian temple of Dendur. Arthur Sackler sponsored the relocation of the temple from Egypt. Smithsonian Institution Arthur M. Sackler Gallery. Arthur M. Sackler Museum at Harvard. Guggenheim Museum's Sackler Center for Arts Education. University of Oxford Sackler Library. The Louvre's Sackler Wing of Oriental Antiques. British Museum's Raymond and Beverly Sackler Rooms. Chapter 6. Generation of Pain Suppressors/Abusers. From the outside, it may have seemed that family utopias and unbreakable brotherly bonds reigned supreme among the Sacklers. However, Bill Froelic's death essentially dissolved the link between siblings in the Musketeers' Pact. As it turned out, there were two Musketeer agreements, domestic and international, but Arthur didn't join the second for some reason. Therefore, after Bill's death, all overseas business, including IMS, which was Arthur's concept alone, went to Raymond and Mortimer, causing a separation from his brothers that infuriated him. At the time of Arthur's death in 1987, the brothers hardly spoke, so when the division of the inheritance began, quarrels broke out in the family. But things calmed down in time. The older Sacklers gradually retired and their children entered the arena. Though each family member got a share in the company, Raymond's son Richard, who became Purdue Frederick's CEO, may be considered the principal successor of the family business. The family's younger generation opted to modify the company's route of growth and concentrate on pain treatment, so for these purposes, they created a new firm, Purdue Pharma. Their first groundbreaking creation was a medication known as Oxycontin, which was essentially morphine packaged in tablet form. However, the company's top objective was to keep the main component of this medicine a secret, since consumers are aware of the potential risks associated with taking drugs of this kind. Remember, according to the American Society of Addiction Medicine, ASAM, more than 80% of heroin users have previously abused prescription opioids. The company promoted aggressive marketing based on the growing concept of the pain epidemic. Numerous groups, institutions, and unions have developed, claiming that for generations, medicine has overlooked the issue of chronic pain and that only now, in the new age of painkillers, can individuals find relief with pharmaceuticals such as Oxycontin. Purdue Pharma financed a significant part of such groups. Luckily, doctors mainly prescribed Oxycontin to treat severe ongoing pain, usually for people living with cancer. However, the drug's success is not indefinite. The time for a unique patent expires, and competitors are already preparing to enter the market with a comparable product at a reduced price. Keep in mind that factual drug patents are valid for 20 years from the date of discovery. However, items' duration on the market is substantially shorter since FDA approvals might postpone their distribution and sales. Therefore, the young Sacklers needed to look for new creative solutions, and Katie, Mortimer's daughter, came up with a new formula for Oxycontin, which included oxycodone, a semi-synthetic pain reliever that belongs to the opioid analgesic class. Chapter 7. When monetary gain trumps the Hippocratic Oath. Oxycontin entered the market in 1996 and was marketed as a scheduled narcotic under the Controlled Substances Act of 1970, even though oxycodone is almost twice as powerful as morphine. The admission of such a heavy drug to the publicly available prescription market is the merit of Mr. Curtis Wright, an FDA official that the Sacklers bribed. Endless sales reps swarmed America's medical institutions, armed with inaccurate information regarding the medicine and vigorously selling it to all potential physicians, licensed or not. As a result, the family gained billions of dollars every month as sales of the drug skyrocketed, but at the same time, thousands of people in the United States grew hooked on the opiate. In the latter half of the 1990s and the early 2000s, warning signs about a potentially worrying upward trend in the population's reliance on the substance emerged. Purdue Pharma was subjected to the first significant probe. The investigation into the pharmaceutical company's carelessness lasted for 5 years, during which time the prosecuting attorneys poured through millions of records. The result of the investigation was the company's guilt plea to a criminal charge of felony misbranding. 3 public representatives of the corporation, Friedman, Goldenheim, and Udell, took full responsibility and complied with a punishment consisting of 3 years of probation and 400 hours of community service. In addition, Purdue paid a fine of $600 million. Interestingly, no family members were prosecuted or even mentioned in scandal-related publications or news. Instead, they remained in the shadows. The Sacklers developed the idea of safeguarding the family among their employees, acting in a mafia-like manner to ensure that those who were loyal to them would always be protected. Despite the penalties, the corporation did not take any action to rectify the problem and carried on with business as usual, blithely disregarding all warnings issued by the relevant authorities. Chapter 8. How Empires Collapse. The company's only effort to remedy the medication problem consisted of developing crush-proof tablets, which they thought would reduce misuse. It would be inaccurate to argue that this development was only motivated by the company's good intentions. The introduction of a new pill version ensured the patient's renewal, but alas, the new version was only successful in making the problem even more severe. Drug addicts who couldn't satisfy their need for the original substance turned to heroin. But this fact didn't disturb the family. It rather reaffirmed their opinion that the fault was with the individuals who abused drugs, not those who manufacture harmful medications. Fortunately, this wasn't the case for long, and many journalists and respected media started to study the origins and reasons for America's opioid problem. The dark line in Sackler's life started with a Los Angeles Times article claiming that the company's claim of 12 hours of painlessness was far from reality. In addition, significant withdrawal symptoms such as an overwhelming longing for the drug were a typical reaction to the short-term relief from Oxycontin. This discovery clarified why so many individuals were getting addicted to the drug. It wasn't long before the corporation received a steady stream of lawsuits. In 2020, 49 states filed lawsuits against the company. Finally, and perhaps most curiously, for the first time in the firm's history, family members couldn't hide behind their devoted workers and were brought to justice. However, they avoided severe sentences due to substantial political ties in President Trump's administration and an exceptional staff of first-rate attorneys. The Sackler sought to squeeze every last drop of value from Purdue Pharma and left it before filing a bankruptcy settlement in 2022. They will be required to pay hefty damages, but no one will go to prison, and the family itself has not been forced into bankruptcy. Ironically, the Sacklers offered to pay $12 billion in damages to settle the case and turn the company into a charity to help addicts, as the Musketeers once planned. Conclusion. Isaac Sackler was fond of reminding his sons that the good name is the most valuable inheritance a father can bestow on his children. Young Arthur, Mortimer, and Raymond took this lesson to heart and endeavored to have their surname engraved on the walls of the world's most prestigious scientific, educational, and artistic institutions. Throughout the 20th century, the Sackler name was linked to significant achievements, including advancements in medicine and science, the rapid growth of psychiatry, a game-changing strategy for advertising and marketing, generous support of educational and cultural endeavors, and extensive charitable contributions. Unfortunately, the 21st century and a new generation of family members added new hues to the name's essence. It is now forever connected with news about harmful drugs and their abuse, the opioid epidemic, false information, concealing facts, litigation, bankruptcy, and bribes. It might seem unbelievable, but every single member of the family refused to acknowledge any wrongdoing on their part. Nevertheless, society has shunned them, and none of their high-ranking connections can assist them. It's fascinating to see how a once honorable name in the world's major prestigious institutions is now being removed as if getting erased from history. As it turns out, money cannot purchase immortality, despite what Arthur desired, but keeping your name clean may ensure you won't get wiped from history. Try this. Everyone has to consider the significance of receiving adequate medical treatment, especially in light of the opioid epidemic sweeping the United States. Always seek the advice of certified and well-regarded specialists. Investigate the information available on the internet about the medications that your doctor has recommended for you. Finally, only purchase drugs from authorized retailers.